Dear students, welcome back. Now, today we'll learn the summary of the story, which is The Parrot in the Cage. So, The Parrot in the Cage is a story which is written by Mulk Raj Anand. Mulk Raj Anand uh, was an Indian writer who has written, a lot of literature, and he is well known for his partition literature. So, before we go directly to the summary of the story, let me take you through the context. Okay, so this is the renowned writer, Indian writer Mulk Raj Anand. So the background of the story is partition of the country. Partition of the country, as most of all of you know, that the partition of India happened in 1947 when, prior to independence, demand for a separate state by the Muslims that was raised, and finally the British, they divided India into what is known as the West Pakistan and the East Pakistan, which was further liberated as Bangladesh in 1971. So, there was a big change overnight, and this became one of the biggest tragedy, the tragedy of partition, because earlier people from both religions, from all religions, they lived in harmony with each other in different parts of the country, and the entire, this province was known as India. Right. So now, with the drawing of a line between these two countries, there spread unprecedented violence in India as well as Pakistan. And the victims of this violence were these common people, okay, those who had no means, those who were poor and common people, they suffered the most, right? So the scenes of arson, burning houses, rapes and murders, they were quite common, and this led to one of the greatest refugee crisis, or you can say exodus, in the world history. There was mass exodus. Mass exodus means people who found themselves threatened on the other side of the border, that is in Pakistan. The Hindus and Sikhs, they were threatened by the Muslim majority people. So ultimately, in order to save their lives, they had to flee from that country to this. And similarly, similar riots followed in Indian side also, and they happened at such a large scale that it became very difficult for the governments of both sides, which were just formed, India and Pakistan, new governments were formed. So it became impossible for the government to control these riots and the exodus which followed. तो ये है इसकी कहानी का बैकग्राउंड, जो हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान के बीच में जो बंटवारा हुआ. एंड प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि बंटवारे से पहले सभी लोग एक साथ रहते थे, हिंदू, सिख, मुस्लिम, ईसाई, whatever religion they had, they lived in close harmony with each other. एक दूसरे के अच्छे पड़ोसी होते थे, एक दूसरे के दुख दर्द बांटते थे. But things changed overnight when the decision of partition was taken. So the yesterday's good friends, good neighbors, they became, the worst enemies of each other. And as a result, what followed was violence, arson, looting, burning of houses, rapes, murders. And so it becomes a big tragedy for these families who were trapped on the wrong side, right? So the story of Rukmani, who is the main character in this story, is also such a woman, an old woman who is in her, very old age. Even she is not spared. Okay, she also has to suffer, just like thousands and millions of men and women, those who suffered the pain of partition. So this people, they had to leave everything behind. उनको सब कुछ छोड़ के आना पड़ा. Their house, their property, their cattle, their fields, something that they had, kept for themselves. Even they could not carry the jewelry and cash because otherwise they would have been killed. So, such was the tragedy of this partition that even an old woman like Rukmani was not spared, right? And finally, when she somehow saves her life from the rioters, वो जो दंगाई थे उनसे अपनी जान बचा के she comes towards the Indian side of the border, but there is no one who knows her now. This is a new world. There is no neighbor. She has no home, and moreover, she has no hope of getting any help from anywhere. So symbolically, she represents the caged parrot, which is the only possession that she has. वो सिर्फ अपने साथ एक पिंजरे में एक तोता रखा, उसको साथ में लेके आ पाती है, बाकी कुछ नहीं, वो सब कुछ पीछे छूट जाता है. And this parrot in the cage becomes a symbol of, enslaving of humanity. इंसानियत को एक तरह से कैद करने का एक सिंबल बन जाता है, right? So we'll go through the summary quickly. So the title of the story is The Parrot in the Cage, and the author is Mulk Raj Anand, and we understood the background also. Parrot in the Cage, this is the author, and the background is the partition of the country. A decision was taken in 1947 where Pakistan was carved out of India, what you know as East Pakistan and West Pakistan, and the violence, the riots, the murders, the burning of houses and looting of property that began afterwards was on a very large scale, and this led to one of the great tragedies in the lives of many people, many of whom they tried to move or flee from their own homes. They were made to run away for their life. Those who could not, or those who dared to stay back, they faced even worst scenario in their life. Many of them were murdered, their women raped, and children faced a lot of difficulties. So The Parrot in the Cage is a story written by Mulk Raj Anand, and it is a story, by now you must have understood, about an old lady, and the name of that lady is Rukmani. She is the main character of the story, and setting or the context I have already told you. It is in the time of partition of India and Pakistan in 1947 after independence. So there were riots, murders, rape and arson everywhere. After the partition, the Hindus who were minority in Pakistan were brutally murdered, their property was looted, their houses burnt, and many of them fled to India, saving their life. In order to save their life, they had to run away, flee from that country. Rukmani was one such old woman who somehow saved her life with the help of her Muslim friend Fatto. So Rukmani की एक मदद करती है उसकी जो मुस्लिम दोस्त होती है Fatto, who gives her a burqa to escape, right? And this is the common scene in the streets during those days. You can see dead bodies lying scattered along the roads, smoke from the buildings, houses burnt. she could carry nothing with her. Now, she was in such a hurry because otherwise, had she delayed a little, then she would have been murdered by the hooligans. She would have been murdered, right? She could not have saved her life. So, in that hurry, the little money that she had saved, you already know, we have already gone through the story. The Rukmani, she is not a very rich lady. She works as a kind of servant in the household of the rich in Lahore, right? And she washes people's clothes and cleans utensils, and that is how she earns her living. And she lives in a kacha chabuk saran that in Lahore, and where she is frequently visited by her friends who keep on calling that Rukmani tu kitte hai. And the next question is Nitu ki karni hai. Like as we go to someone's house, तो सबसे पहले हम ये पूछते हैं भाई ओए बल्कू वो क्या कर रहा है तो किधर है या कहाँ है. You ask such questions. So similarly in Punjabi they ask Rukmani tu kitte hai, tu Nitu ki karni hai. So these are the sentences which are crammed by the parrot. तो रुक्मणी के पास एक तोता है जो ये बातें सुनता रहता है और वो उनको रट लेता है. Because parrots are cramming birds. They can cram things and repeat. उनको राम राम बोलेंगे तो राम राम बोलने लग जाएंगे. तो इस तरह से वो sentences उसने रटे हुए. कहाँ से सीखे? From the friends and relatives of Rukmani, those who used to visit her in Lahore when she was in Lahore, right? And when the story begins, she has already reached Amritsar. So we come to know about the things which happened in the past through flashback. So जब वो वहाँ बैठी होती है तो वो सोचती है past के बारे में. Then we come to know what happened on that night or how she saved her life. So flashback में हमको पता चला. So she has already reached Amritsar and she is sitting in roadside close to the district courts. And because she had heard at the railway station, announcement was made that all those who were homeless and those who had migrated from Pakistan to India will get help from the government. So her only hope is to get some help from the deputy commissioner. So she sits on the road which leads to the office of deputy commissioner, and what she only has a caged parrot or a parrot in the cage, and otherwise she has nothing with her, right? She does not know where to go because this is a new place, a new situation, new people. There is no one who knows her because her friends were there in Lahore where she used to live, because she has spent her entire life there. And she has no home, no property, nothing with her. She could not even carry the little cash that she had saved for her old days. Even in that hurry, she should not even carry that cash that she had hidden, right? So she was a humble maid servant, as I told you, who worked in the people's household in England, Lahore. तो एक नौकरानी का काम करती थी बड़े लोगों के घर में लाहौर में. And the irony of this violence is that even an old and poor lady like Rukmani was not spared by the communal writers in Lahore. जो धार्मिक दंगाई थे उन्होंने इसको भी नहीं बख्शा, इस बूढ़ी औरत को, right? The refugees, though they were promised by both the governments that every help will be given to them, but they were not getting any help because this crisis happened at such a large scale. There was mass exodus, means large number of people in the thousands, they crossed the border, and it became impossible for both the governments to either control the writers, communal writers, or to provide facilities to the refugees. So they had to live on the railway platforms, railway stations, or they had to face a lot of difficulties. So Rukmani, with the help of her friend Fatto gives her her burqa to escape, right? And then she reaches Amritsar. Uh, then the only companion that Rukmani has, और उसका एक ही साथी है उसके साथ अभी, वो है the parrot in the cage. और वही उसको जानता है, वही पहचानता है. There is no one else because her world has, just finished. उसकी सारी दुनिया जो थी एक झटके में ही तबाह हो. Because there is no one who knows her, there is no place she can go to, there is no one who can recognize her except this parrot. And the parrot has crammed few sentences. इस parrot ने जो थे कुछ sentences जो मैंने बताया आपको, वो इसने रट रखे हैं. That it used to hear at Lahore. जो वहाँ पे सुनता था. कौन बोलता था? Rukmani's friend. When they used to come there. So they are Rukmaniye ni तू की करनी है, ni तू किथे है. So the parrot is like a son to Rukmani. So whenever it finds her in trouble, it gets agitated and is the only thing in the entire world who knows this old woman. Because this woman is facing an identity crisis at the very end of her life. After so many years, the irony of the situation is that there is no one who can recognize her, who knows her, except for this parrot. So this parrot is like a son to her, because it is only this parrot who knows her name. So the parrot in the cage is also a symbol of Rukmani and humanity in cage. Both have been the victims of violence due to the partition of India, right? So the questions which are repeated by the parrot, Rukmani ani tu kitte hai, symbolize the existential questions. जो existential questions हैं, जिसमें उसको खुद पता नहीं है रुक्मणी कि वो है कौन. एक्चुअली सिचुएशन ऐसी आ गई है कि आज इतना 70-80 साल होने के बावजूद भी there is no one who can recognize her, who can take her name, whom she can turn for help to. Even when she was sitting outside the deputy commissioner's office, there were many like her who wanted help, but what they got is they got lathi charged, and ultimately she falls on the ground, and the parrot starts crying very hoarsely again and again. Rukmani, she is picked up by that gram stall keeper who was selling roasted grams nearby, who helps her get up, and then he also helps her by offering some roasted grams. So, the constant cries of the parrot, he keeps on asking the question, Rukmani ani tu kitte hai. So this is the question of existence many people faced. बहुत सारे लोग थे जिनका घर था, परिवार थे, दोस्त थे, उनका धंधा था, काम धंधा था, हर चीज़ थी, रिश्तेदारी थी, दूर दूर तक सब एक पूरा ताना बाना था जो एक पल में, एक सेकंड में ख़त्म हो गया. And this crisis was faced by many like Rukmani. And why the writer has used an old woman as a character? Because he wants to expose the hypocrisy of this communal violence. So communal violence does not differentiate between the innocent and the culprit. So here everyone becomes, irrespective of their age, gender, they become the victims, silent victims of violence. And this is what happened, during the partition. So ultimately, the gram stall keeper, he knows the reality that government is not in a position to help everyone, every refugee. So he proposes her to go to the nearby Gurudwara so that she could get something to eat. So this is how the story ends. And basically, the questions that may be asked, I have already covered. It may be asked that how the parrot is a symbol of Rukmani and humanity. Right? So both are victims of violence, Rukmani as well as humanity, due to the partition. So this is a story which you can go through and you can learn for your exams also.